had last?
What's that?
Rematch.
How did I know?
I don't know.
You two called each other, didn't you?
Yeah, we
Or
called
maybe-
each other.
Yep.
Nice looking presentation.
I'd like to call the meeting to order for the regular Board of Selectmen for February 22nd, 2022.
Candace Bouchard.
Jonathan Moorhart.
Candy Perez.
Josh Kelly.
Todd Archelashi.
Glenn Albanesius. Stephen Sedlak.
Linda Grappo.
Jack Bork.
Join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda review, do we have any additions? Seeing none, can we have an approval of minutes for the regular meeting on February 7th?
So moved.
I have a edit, if that's fine.
I'll second.
Okay, now discussion, Jonathan?
It was very minor. In the call to order, my name was misspelled. It was spelled Jonathon instead of An.
Okay, sorry about that, Jonathan.
That's fine.
Is that it? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Unanimous? Citizens' comments. The Board of Selectmen welcomes public comments. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes or less and may speak only once this round. How are we doing the call-in? David, come on up.
I have that available.
David LaPointe, 11 Hillside Avenue, Winchester, Connecticut. In regards to the last meeting, when you had the town manager present to you the recreational marijuana, proposal for our town, I hope that each one of you does not make this town open for that, because this town has enough issues already with drugs and illegal substances that have killed a lot of people. I don't know the exact figure. I'm sure the mayor does. I'm sure past mayor does, and the past mayor. And I think that our families deserve better. I think that, if everyone works together, as the boards have been in the past and now, that you can find businesses that are legal under federal law, and also that would better the community. And keep people sober, as opposed to having this recreational. I have no problem with the medical marijuana if it indeed is helping the person. But when it comes to recreational, it's like saying we're going to give, have more bars. And I know at one time there were more bars in the town, and there were also a lot of problems. But that's what I wanted to say, and I hope that you not voting on it doesn't mean that it's going to give them carte blanche to get that to come in. I hope that's not the case, because that was what was said to me by a member of the public, that if the selectmen vote not to have this kind of business come in, then it leaves the door open. So I hope that's wrong, and I hope that you don't leave the door open, that you definitively exercise your right to say no to that kind of business. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else like to speak? Town Manager's report?
Questions of recreation cannabis. As of February 17th, 2022, no new written comments have been shared with my office. As those comments come in, I'm happy to continue to report back to the selectmen about those until such a time as they're no longer desired or required. On the item of COVID-19, the governor's executive orders on masks will change at the end of this month, and the Director of Emergency Management and I are issuing new information about how these changes will be implemented in Town Hall in the near future. My understanding from the state is that there will generally be a lot of latitude given to municipalities about what will be permitted in terms of continued masking or not. Given the way that the numbers are going and given the fact that we've been using numeric metrics to try and make very sound policy in the past, we're working to create a policy that is going to allow us to be mask optional under a certain threshold, so long as we don't have so many X number of cases, X positivity rate, X hospitalizations in the state and in our area, we'll be able to go mask optional, I hope, in the very near future. So please stay tuned. This is something that we've all been wanting for a really long time. This is something that we had for a few months in the summer when things were a lot better numerically. And I hope that things continue to go in a very good direction and that people are feeling well. Regarding COVID-19 testing, test kits remain available at Town Hall for individuals who need them. Please call 860-379-8771 to inquire further. On economic development, I'll just share with everybody, I really appreciate several of the selectmen did attend this meeting in person, and I know that others wished to be there. And we had a great meet and greet with members of the Economic Development Commission and the new Director of Economic Development. I thought the program, there was a lot of energy. There were a lot of folks who went to that program who I know were very impressed with our new Director of Economic Development and who I think had a very positive interaction with the town as a whole. Things continue to look up on the economic development side. And on that same subject, I want to mention that the Facade and business startup programs, those applications are now being reviewed. I know a lot of folks have emailed me over the past couple days. We're just wondering about a timeline for that. I will be sending out an email to everybody who has put in an application either tonight or first thing tomorrow to let them know where they stand within the process. And that group met last week to begin the review on specifically the facade program applications last week, and we'll continue to look at all of the program applications actually just tomorrow. And we'll continue from there until all of the money has been distributed. So all of that is very positive as well. The big thing I want to share tonight is that we have finished what I've affectionately been referring to as the Roadshow, and it's been a series of different presentations that we have given around town. It started here. January 31st was our first official presentation separate from a regular Board of Selectmen meeting, and we had the opportunity to visit not just Town Hall but also Winchester Center. We had the opportunity to be at the Winstead Senior Center. We were at the Little Red Barn. And we also had a virtual meeting by Zoom. Over the course of these several meetings, I know that we had the opportunity to sit with dozens of members of the public and answer questions on a one-to-one basis. And I think that everybody left those meetings feeling even more positive than they came in. And I have to say, the energy around these meetings has been very positive. Certainly, we've had a few comments that have been made about, well, I wish that my road was on as a part of the plan, and I wish that the total budget wasn't going to be impacted by this. And of course, I think we would all like to have services that come free. That sounds wonderful. But the bottom line is that people understand, the folks who have been coming out to these meetings have a distinct understanding that we are in need of further investment in our town's infrastructure and in the town's future. I think that I recognize the fact that the Board of Selectmen as well as town staff have put in a lot of time and effort to making sure that this presentation is answering questions, is upfront, is straightforward, and is going to leave a lasting impact if adopted. The plan itself will leave a lasting impact on the town. So I want to share all of this with the Board of Selectmen and let you know that I believe that you have the support in the community to move forward with the plan as it's been proposed. And I'm looking forward later on in our discussions tonight. You'll have an opportunity to discuss this just a little bit further, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have either after my report's done or during that section. But I was just so pleased with the turnout that we've had, and the hundreds of people also who had the opportunity to watch one or more of our presentations online. On permitting software, I've been trying to give you every month a list of updates on American Rescue Plan Act projects, but I know that this is one it's not just tied to the American Rescue Plan Act. This is something that we've been longing for a long time in this town, is online permitting. The good news is that we've kicked this off. We've had that initial kickoff meeting with the company that's going to be issuing our permitting software, which is OpenGov. That's the name of the company that we're working with. And between the building department and the planning department, they're working very closely with the different businessmen from OpenGov to make sure that they have as much information as they need about our permitting process, about the fees that we collect, and so forth. Our hope is that we will have that 100% up and running without any kinks in the system by early to mid-spring. So we're moving, we're on our way, and I'll continue to give updates as they come along. And more departments will be added to that as time goes on, but we're starting with building and planning to make sure that we get it right the first time, and that we're really honed in on the areas where it's going to make the greatest difference first. And lastly, the Sue Grossman Greenway, this is really more of a reminder. Jim Rollins and Bart Clark at the Department of Public Works have announced that they've reached the final touches on the engineering plan for the portion of the Greenway that's already been funded by the state, and they are going to present information about the plan and next steps to you at the next regular Board of Selectmen meeting on March 7th. So I'll be looking forward to that. And then I've listed for you a number of different upcoming events and dates to keep in mind. Are there any questions that I can answer for you at this time? Ask Candace.
In the permitting software, that program, does that include GIS mapping, or is that something separate?
GIS mapping is contracted separately.
Okay.
Now we contract with the Timmins Group to conduct our GIS. And as you'll recall, through the American Rescue Plan Act, we have a sum of money that's going to help us improve the GPS location and accuracy on the GIS system. But that is separate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, Linda.
I just had to the infrastructure. You know, you did an excellent job with your presentations.
Thank you.
Very, very impressive. Your team really worked hard.
They
Nice
did.
job.
They did.
But I'm just curious about the cannabis. You said there are no new written comments. So what's the next step? What's going on? What's the status, and what's going to happen after that?
A good question. So the Planning and Zoning Commission, this is my understanding, if there's anybody else who wants to chime in on their understanding, please feel free, is that the Planning and Zoning Commission wants to hear feedback. Certainly a level of feedback was presented, not just tonight, but at the last meeting by members of the public, and that's helpful. But I believe that they would be interested in hearing feedback from you. Whether you choose to do that as a group or whether you choose to do that individually is your prerogative, but that is the message that they had sent along, that they would like to hear more feedback before they make decisions. And ultimately, it will be the Planning and Zoning Commission that decides whether any kind of cannabis-related business is able to locate in town, and to determine where in town they would be able to locate, if so.
And they're also drafting an ordinance for us for where the areas that cannot, where cannabis and smoking cannot be
Yes.
done.
And beyond just the Planning and Zoning Commission for that, I'll really be working closely with the town attorney to make that happen.
Right.
But that seems to be a general consensus. I haven't heard anybody who isn't interested at this point in time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, who isn't interested in seeing some enforcement and some penalties for individuals who choose to use cannabis products out on municipal property in public. So if you'd like to give me further direction on that, I'm happy to take
Or
it.
businesses.
But businesses too, certainly outdoor dining is
Right.
a large
Or
area.
sidewalks. And,
Yep.
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 I think there was 50 feet was written in originally, 50 feet from any business,
Mhm.
you know, besides municipal areas.
Right.
On that, what I'd like to do is 2 more weeks of resident input, and then at our next meeting, we can share our opinions.
Do you have another question?
Josh, a couple of updates. What's the status of the 508 Main Street?
Status of 508 Main Street, I have an appointment that's set up with the Department of Transportation, and I can pull out my calendar and let you know what that date is, but it's sometime next week, where they are going to come and do an evaluation on whether or not it is physically possible to have a driveway enter in and out of that lot. There's some concern that's been brought forward. I know that a parking lot has been discussed a lot, and certainly that's one of the options that we want to present. But at this time, I want to make sure, given the line of sight issues that you have coming around the corner headed westbound from the Y building, I want to make sure that somebody pulling out of that parking space by DOT standards would be able to do so safely.
Has there been any more discussion about the use of the building itself? Any more entries of option? I know the time is gone from that, but
Yep.
anything else changed?
I can tell you that there has been interest from other business owners, and one of the reasons we're pursuing trying to get more information about a parking lot is because there are other people along Main Street who are interested in seeing that become a parking lot, whether they own it or the town owns it. However, there has been no further interest expressed in making use of that building, no.
Okay, second update. I know we talked, the EDC and you, and there was this general meeting of talking with the Department of Transportation regarding Main Street and speeds. Anything come back from that yet?
Not yet. So, and to update anybody who isn't totally apprised of this, there was a meeting that was held between, as Jack said, there were a couple of selectmen who had the opportunity to be there, and there were a few members of the EDC and this was really actually driven by Sean McGlynn from Second Home down on Main Street, and a few other business owners came in. And I had it was supposed to just be a roundtable conversation with the EDC and say, hey, what can we do to move things along and try and get some nose-in parking and try and slow speeds down on Main Street. Those were the two big drivers of the conversation. By happenstance, Jim Rollins and I, parallel to this, have been working to get in touch with somebody from the Department of Transportation about Main Street to figure out exactly what is going on and what can we do to help it. So in a great display of, I think, the way that DOT has really reframed itself, we had one of the leaders of a planning division reach out to us and say, hey, I know that you are looking to make some changes. My team's the one that can make that happen for you. Let me in on your meeting. I want to hear what people have to say, and then I want to hear what you have to say, and we'll come up with some ideas, and we'll review some of your comments and move from there. So what happened was at that very small meeting, a few members of the business community shared their thoughts. Afterwards, Jim Rollins and I put our heads together and sent along a few more comments in addition to that. We sent those off not yesterday, but 2 weeks prior to that, two Mondays before that. At this point in time, we haven't heard back from DOT, but we were told at that point it was going to be 4 to 5 weeks after we submitted it. So I'm still expecting that it's going to be another 2 or 3 weeks before we hear a response. At that time, we were told, the name's Patrick Zapata, for anybody who's interested at DOT. He told us that he is going to give us a list of what we are able to do to help slow down speed and increase parking, and what we are not able to do. And from there, we will work. I'll bring forward to you any thoughts that he has. He's also going to come out and do a site review to talk more specifically about the thoughts that his planning team has, and we'll think about ways to implement some of the suggestions he has.
Fair enough. I just was looking for an update, whether that reported.
Nothing back yet, but they have all the information they need. They're going to reach back out if they have further questions.
The last thing I just would add to your comments about upcoming events, March 1st, Tuesday, 3 o'clock, the Hinsdale School walkthrough.
That's a good point, and I'm sorry that I didn't include that.
That's
and
open to
sorry,
the-
could you repeat the time?
Yes, as I recall, and I have it on my calendar, Tuesday, March 1st, 3 p.m.
Yeah, it's
Meeting
okay.
on Williams Avenue, and then walking in from there as a group.
Yeah, very good. And that's open to all the selectmen, yes.
Any other questions for Josh? Before we move on, anyone watching the live stream on YouTube, we apologize for any technical difficulties that may be happening. Picture looks pretty dark. I think you can still hear us though. Moving on to the finance director's report. Anne Marie, Bruce, you guys have anything, or turn it over to Mr. King?
For now, we'll turn it over to Chris, so he can move along if he would like to, so we'll let him. Does anyone need a copy of the document?
Yes, thank you.
Was there anyone else that needs a copy? Anybody? Anyone else? I think I have one. I did not bring copies of the, I don't have enough federal and state single audit copies. I did not bring those along with me, but if anyone would like them, I can get you a copy of that.
Shall I begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When I got the notification that we were on the agenda tonight, it said to plan on 10 to 15 minutes. So I will go, as I said to the mayor beforehand, I will go and try to accomplish this in 10 to 15 minutes, but I'll look to him and he can decide how long we want to stay on the topic. It's tough to get all this stuff in. We do weeks and weeks of work. Your main report is 105 pages long. You also have a federal single audit, a state single audit, but we're going to go through it pretty quickly. I did hand out this little summary that we put together, and we tend to use this on pretty much all of our presentations. Helps to move it along. We do index it to page numbers in the audit, so that if we talk about something and you want to look at it later or now, we can look at that. It starts on the second page with audit sections. The audit generally starts at a pretty high level, and the further you go into it, it gets more detailed. So in our little bullet points here, it talks about the introductory section and our main report on the financial statements. Management discussion and analysis is a narrative section, highlighting various inputs that led to the results of your financial activities. Then we say we have basic financial statements, 19 to 66. So there's 47 pages of financial statements and note disclosures there. Then beyond that, there's supplemental schedules. A lot of them relate to the pension. There are also some of the smaller funds that are consolidated up front are in detail in the back. And we'll talk about some highlights. You also have, at the very end, a statistical section, which gives a lot of 10-year trends, where you can see trends on tax collection rates, fund balance levels, overall expenditures, et cetera. The second major bullet item, I mentioned earlier, we have separate packages. There's a state single audit, which is a grant compliance audit on your state funding. And there's a federal single audit package, which is a grant compliance audit on your federal funding, even though a lot of that does come through the state, but it's federally sourced. The final thing is an area that a lot of people, especially on the town boards, don't even realize we do. But every town that has its own school district, the State Department of Education has its own list of testing procedures, and they specify their own tests that we do to a Board of Ed systems, and it's basically the online financial reporting system that the state has developed. It's becoming a bigger and bigger component of the audit in part because the State Department of Ed is asking for more, in part because they're creating new financial reporting systems that don't always work. So the local boards of ed, we're asking them for information from these systems that they can't even generate. But it's dictated by the State Department of Education. So the local boards are struggling a little to help us with that. But if I go to the next page where it says highlights, on page 21, you would find a fund balance sheet. Your general fund is there, a capital projects fund. Major funds are on that page. I should say your grants and donations fund is on there. But your fund balance at the end of the year was $10.5 million. That is made up of several different components. You have some money set aside for capital projects, for example. But the total fund balance is 10.5. There's a couple benchmarks. The Government Finance Officers Association has a benchmark of 2 months of your annual revenues is a good level to have in surplus. Your unassigned or available fund balance is 7.3 million. That's 21%, so you've exceeded that benchmark of 16.67%. Also on that page, I mentioned the Grants and Donations Fund. The town and all towns received the first ARPA payment in June. That has generally recommended to be in a separate grants fund, and most towns are doing that, as you did. It's not yet taken into revenue, so if you look at that statement, you'll see a large asset. You have cash or receivables, and then you have an offsetting, it's called deferred revenue, because you have not earned that revenue by expending it yet. So you receive the first half of the ARPA money, you have not yet recognized it as revenue until you start expending it on ARPA projects. ARPA at first, when it came out, it was relatively restricted and confined as to what you could use it for. There were some complicated calculations, but in the middle of January, they came out with a final rule, releasing it so that up to $10 million of that funding is pretty much unrestricted and not subject to the initial restrictions that came out. You just can't use it for debt service, pension contributions, or litigation. Then we mentioned page 21, again, our major funds. Because you're in the middle of a renovation project at the Hinsdale School, for the moment, that's a major fund, because major fund is a mathematical calculation. If the fund is big enough, it's a major fund. So you'll see, like this Hinsdale renovation fund, as the project is in process, it's a major fund. As it winds up, the activity goes down, it becomes a non-major fund and rolls to the back of the audit report. After those fund financial statements, the WPCA, the water and the sewer departments, have their own set of financial statements, and that's because they're not funded by tax dollars primarily. They're funded by user fees and occasionally grants. So if we had a history lesson here, the water and sewer was in a very different situation a number of years ago from where you are now. Where you are now is you had one payment left of your bonded debt, obligation bonds. You do have some clean water funds that were borrowed and need to be repaid. Those tend to be 40-year loans, so they're always hanging around. That's much smaller, so your water and sewer funds are almost debt-free. They had a huge balance go back to the general fund. That's all been paid off. The last bullet on the water and sewer says that if you backed out depreciation, which is the cost of your buildings and everything that's being expensed, it's not cash. They actually had positive changes for the year of $500,000 for water and almost $400,000 for sewer. On page 29, you have, again, another set of financial statements. This is for the pension assets. What we're seeing has happened in all the towns in the past year. The pension assets had a huge rebound through investment income, and we're going to look at that. So we have here that you have net investment income of $2.1 million in that 12-month period alone. There's a schedule, a multi-year trend schedule on that. You're up to about 75% funded with this big jump in investment income and return. You were previously in the 60s, the mid-60s, before that the 50s and the 40s, because that had also been unfunded. Mid-70s is actually where most people were trying to be pre-pandemic. So the mid-70s was a good funding level for a defined benefit plan, which is actually your old frozen plan. Some towns that were at 75% are now at 90 or 100%. They're actually overfunded. But because you were in the 60s, it brought you up to 70. So it kind of brought you up to what we would say a normal nationwide average of funding. The next page is a graph. That's why I handed it out in color, so you can see the graph, the fund balance trend. The most current year is on the left. So actually, as you go left to right, it actually gets older. So you can see that your fund balances have been increasing from 19 through 21. That yellow component, committed, that is, the vast majority of that is for capital projects. It's money that has been identified and earmarked out of the general fund for capital projects. And then the next page, where it talks about highlights continued. These page references are the notes. The notes provide detail to those financial statements in the front. There's tables on fixed assets and debt. First bullet point talks about what's happening with your debt. Because you have not borrowed much in years, you've been in a pay down phase of debt. You're paying down your previous GO bonds, general obligation bonds, about $400,000 a year. You have had a history of some capital leases for equipment purchases. It could be for police vehicles or highway equipment. And then that third bullet, decrease in net pension liability. So your pension liability, because of that huge investment return, decreased $1.9 million in that 12-year period. So that was a huge gain. Now, on the other hand, you have some people who are in the state MERS plan, and you pay into that. That's a multi-employer cost-sharing plan. Their plan, your liability went up for your employees in that plan. There could be many factors. One of them is that people tend to feel that the state's expected investment return is a little too high. Their actuarial assumption is at 7%. Most people are at 6.5%, 6.75%. So this huge bump in investment return didn't impact them as much favorably as it did to everyone else, such as your plan, which was a little bit more conservative. Total OPEB liability, that's a health insurance for retirees plan. It's a complicated benefit. I'm going to skip to where we talk about page 53 and page 64. You have pages and pages of notes on pension plans, including the state plans for which you do not even pay for the certified teachers, for it is required under our accounting standards to put that information in. We generally have these bullets in here because people want to know, when they hear occasionally the state says, we think we're going to make the town responsible for 10% or 20% of the teacher's retirement pension plan. And they say, gee, how would that impact us? Well, the first thing you look at is the liability. $22 million, that could scare you. But again, that's a long-term actuarial liability. I think the more relevant number is the second sentence in that bullet. How much is the state putting in on your behalf, on behalf of the Winchester teachers? So for fiscal year 21, they put in $1.4 million. So you can kind of extrapolate from there. If the state said, we want you to pick up 10% of the teacher's pension plan, you would be about $140,000. But I will remind you that they historically have underfunded that plan as well. So they're always in a catch-up in funding on that plan. The page 64 bullet, there's also a retiree health insurance benefit for teachers. It's much smaller. It's a very modest benefit. So the numbers are a lot smaller. The state put into that plan on your behalf or on your retired teacher's behalf, $34,000. The last bullet on that page, we talk about taxes receivable. A well-designed audit does not stay the same every year from year to year. It responds to risks. You talked about permitting earlier. We have, in the past 2 years, been focusing a lot on permitting. And the reason is, people will ask us, why are you focusing on the building department? What difference does that make? Well, the building department captures changes in property values, which then go to the assessor, which then builds your grand list. Grand list is your largest source of revenue. So we have expanded our testing in the building office, in the assessor's office. We have no findings in your particular audit, but we have had findings. We have had people terminated. We have had people that have initiated forensic audits because of our work in permitting. So you don't have that, but that has been an issue, and we are pushing people towards the computerized permitting, as I heard you discussing. That seems to be a solution in a lot of cases. Anyway, I got on that because we also do that with taxes receivable. We find that the normal range of taxes receivable as a percentage of the current levy is generally about 2 to 8%. A lot of people are really low right now. There was good tax collections during the pandemic for some reason. If you get higher than 8%, we would modify your testing. If you rolled back a bunch of years to the Oxford embezzlement, if you ran this benchmark on the Oxford tax collections, you would immediately know there was a problem. And in our case, we would have changed our testing and most likely uncovered that problem. But you're in a good range right now, so it's good. The next page, we talk about the federal and state single audits, which are the separate, smaller packages. You will always have a state single audit because you get more than $300,000 of state money every year. I can think of maybe 1 year where you did not have a federal single audit, so I expect you will have one every year going out, especially with ARPA money, ESSER money. The boards of ed are getting ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, different types of COVID award money. But for the federal single audit, you had $2.2 million of federal awards that you spent in the past year. The highlights, you had $680,000 in a firefighter's equipment grant. That was kind of a regional grant, bought a lot of radios, not only for this town, but for other departments. $644,000 for education. That's pretty consistent. They have what's called Title I, Title II grants, IDEA grants. They get them every year. And then where it says food programs for children, that's school nutrition. Those are high right now because of everybody receiving free school lunches. So everybody's school nutrition grants are a lot higher. I expect that will go down at some point. Although actually this town had free school nutrition prior to COVID, so it may not change as much for you. Then there's the state single audit. Again, in both cases, we have separate audit guides that in addition to the financial audit, we do these compliance audits, and depending on which programs you're receiving and what the guidance tells us which programs we should be looking at, they have special testing that we do. You had $13 million of state funds, and similar to every town, the vast majority of it is ECS and the special ed excess cost. So that was $8.4 million. You happen to be in a period where you have a lot of school construction grants. You had $1.5 million. And then another $1.8 million in other education, and you have a lot of early childhood and child care grants flowing through the town. This next one says auditor staff rotation. This board has pretty consistently asked us about the rotation of staff. They're concerned about objectivity in our approach to the audit. This past year in particular, we rotated off our lead auditor, so we're constantly rotating people in and out for objectivity. But this year we made a rather large move in a supervisory role. So we just want to let you know that because you have been asking about that in the past. And that's the end of the slides. And that's about 130 pages of report in however many minutes it took. So I'll hand it back to the mayor, and you can lead us where you want to go from here.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. King?
Yeah, I'm just going through all this, and hopefully I've got the right pages and stuff. On page 26. Waterworks and sewer. Was there a deficit in the sewer?
So there is a deficit, but if we go up under that second section, operating expenses,
Right.
that depreciation expense is very large. And
So
so
that's
I mentioned that very quickly as I was going through. That's a non-cash charge. And often that's funded with USDA grants and loans. So you tend to have a huge investment in infrastructure in 1 year and about a $4 million surplus because of funding, and then you have depreciation charges every year after that.
So it's not cash.
It's not cash. If you actually look at page 27, that's a statement of cash flows. Kind of backs out all these gap adjustments, long-term adjustments. A good indicator on a cash flow statement is that this first subtotal, net cash provided by operating, is positive. Because you need that cash surplus to then fund the section below, the few sections below, which is your debt repayment and reinvestment in infrastructure. So sometimes when people are looking at financial health for this type of a fund, you'll get the cash flow. If you're negative in the top section, you're doomed. You're not generating enough cash to make your debt payments.
And then, just in general, so we had our, expenditures and then we get the revenue. So just without having to go through all these little different numbers and stuff, how much to the good were we?
It was.
And then my other second question with that, and you might need Bruce for this one, is did we pay for the capital out of the budget this past year? Because you know how last year we had the big charge of capital items within the budget report that made it look like we spent over? But it was already,
Yes, that was, so I'll cover that. So it's on page 70, revenues less expenditures. You're just under 1.3 million on a budgetary basis. And just above that, on page 70, you can see you did have, you had budgeted a transfer. So you're funding your capital projects through a large transfer in the general fund. So 1.25 is going from general fund, from the budget, into the capital projects, and you're funding capital projects out of that capital projects fund.
thank you.
And that's then reflected in the bar chart that you showed us, the colored chart here.
Actually, no, that's the money still in the general fund.
Still in the general fund, that
Yeah,
hasn't been.
that's earmarked for capital.
Any other questions?
And I just, if I could just add to that part in the bar chart, the yellow committed, 1.9 of that is capital projects, $500,000 is for education, that non-lapsing education fund, where
Right,
their
right.
prior year surpluses, you allow them to put into a non-expiring fund.
And thank you for rotating people, because that's, I always ask you that question every year.
I meant to go off script in the beginning. So you were filed by December 31st.
That's what I was gonna say. I wanted to thank you for,
Wh-
and the
About,
finance department for filing on time.
it is becoming quite a feat. These audit reports have become so complicated, and the people able to do them are so scarce. About 1/3 of the towns in the state were filed by 12/31, so you're in that 1/3 group. As of today, technically two months late, 1/3 of the towns are still not filed. It's a trend that has continued, and a couple of groups, associations that I'm in, we petitioned the state saying a deadline that cannot be reached by most is not a valid deadline. And they said, it's too much work to change the deadline, we'll just keep granting extensions. Education has said the same thing. I mentioned about this EFS work that they have us do, because we can't do it till the audit is done. So if your audit is still not done as of today, you can't finish the EFS work for the Board of Ed, and the Department of Education is basing their formula grants on that, ECS, et cetera. And so we said, you really need to change that, and they said, we can't. It's just becoming a big problem. Because 2/3 of the towns are not in compliance.
So we're ahead then.
You're ahead.
All right.
The
Well,
majority is not. The
Well,
majority is,
we've been behind, so it's good to be ahead.
Thanks, Chris.
you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, sir.
Also, again, I should have said this. I was going too fast. You did not have any findings,
That's
Wh-
important.
which is important. You would find them mostly in those federal and state single audits. For you, you have not had findings lately, again, which is unusual. We're not afraid to publish a finding. So, again, you're in the minority on that as well.
Well, I think we also have Bruce to thank for that, right?
And the schools,
And the schools.
and the schools.
Anne Marie, before you continue your report, I just wanted to add, I did note, I know it was included for all the selectmen in the online packet and it was posted online, but it appears that a printed copy of the transfer request is not in every selectman's packet. Bruce, is there any chance we could impose upon you to print out a transfer request that was sent to all the Board of Selectmen members? There's a transfer request that was
the
sent,
request I gave
emailed.
to you.
Yes, a budget transfer request. I can forward you the document if you can scroll through and print one. I just want to make sure we have it once we get to that point in the agenda. So I'll forward it to you right now.
Send it to me by email.
Yes,
How many copies do we want?
Where-
just 10. Yep.
Do we have it?
So it was sent to you all virtually, but it was not printed in your packet.
It was after the packet went out, wasn't it?
No, it was included
Was
in
it
the
included?
emailed packet.
No, we only need 9.
It's just not, the only ones were printed,
Oh,
didn't get it.
okay.
Only need 9.
Yep, my apologies for the disruption. I just wanted to make sure that we were having that printed
forgot.
while we're attending to other things.
I forgot about that. Okay.
$10,000 transfer.
What?
10,000 for salt,
That's a
sand,
good one.
maintenance.
Can you hear me? I feel like I can't hear my own self
Check
here.
if there's a light on the bottom of that, it's on.
I think it's on.
Yep.
Okay. Well, good evening. I just want to walk through the fiscal 2022 general fund results as of January 31st, 2022. We are 7 months into the year, and excuse me, my glasses are going to fog up, so if I stop in the middle of this, it's because I can't see anything. We are about 58% through the fiscal year. So revenues, property taxes current year to date, we're at $23.4 million, which is 96% collected. You'll recall that January is when we collect most of the second half of our property taxes. That compares to $22.9 million, which is, we were at 93% as of the same period last year. We thank the taxpayers for paying their taxes on time. Total revenues, year-to-date as of January 31st, are at $28.8 million, which is 83% of the budget, in comparison to 81% last year for the same time period at $27.6 million. Our expenditures to date are $19.5 million, so we are at 56% of budget, compared to $18.4 million, which was 54% for last year. Our municipal aid that we received in January, we received our second payment for town aid of $149,677. So that is now complete for the year. We are not owed any more town aid. We received a small amount for emergency planning of $4,521. And our second payment for ECS of $1,955,998 we received, and we will receive the final 50%, which will be double that amount in April. Cash flow, we are at $20.1 million as of January 31st. Of that, 8.7 of that was invested. 6.5 was in the Northwest Community Bank sweep account, and 2.2 million of that was in STIF. And Cindy will be moving some additional tax revenue. Obviously, from January taxes, we have a lot of money sitting in the bank, and she'll be moving some money into investments in February. Capital improvements, we have ongoing engineering and road maintenance. We received $15,000 from the state for our engineering cost reimbursement. We also received $2.4 million from the state of Connecticut DAS for Hinsdale School renovation that Bruce had put in for in the last month or so. And we have $5 million of our $10 million 3-year Bank of America non-revolving line of credit in use. Further questions? That's it. I'll just give you a quick update. Obviously, we're in the middle of our budget. We had a long day today with many of our departments going through the budget line items with them. And we'll be working, from now until when we have to get this finished and sent over to you. So, and I know at last week's meeting, we had some discussion on budget and where we would like to see the budget land. So we're working hard to get this all put together. That's it.
Thank you. Correspondence, does anyone on the board have anything? Moving on to boards and commissions, Steve?
Thank you, Todd. You see in your package, we have one action item, and that is to approve the appointment of Shane Deschamps to the Economic Development Commission as an alternate, term to expire in April of 2027. I will make that nomination at this point, to appoint Shane.
I'll second.
Jonathan's got a second.
You will recall that we recently appointed him to the Recreation Board. He's in attendance tonight. Thank you, Shane. And with that, I think we'll vote.
All in favor? Unanimous?
And Jack, you have some information?
Yeah, I have one other position I'd like to bring up. I just found out from the Zoning Board of Appeals at a meeting next door that they're down one permanent member, and there is an alternate member, Ron Dew, who we appointed as a alternate member, I think back in June or July. He has agreed to move up to a permanent position, and the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals would appreciate if we could move that tonight. I know it's not, wasn't here ahead of time, but he would appreciate if we could bring him into a full-time position tonight. That would leave us then with a position of a Zoning Board of Appeals alternate opening. So if possible, if there's approval here, I'd like to nominate Ron Dew as a permanent member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, I'm sorry I do not have term dates, but if we need that, we can wait until our next meeting. But otherwise, I'd like to see if we can move it.
You're moving to appoint, not nominate.
Excuse me?
You're moving to appoint, not nominate.
Correct.
Reappoint, well,
They're moving to
appoint him
appoint.
as a permanent member.
Right, but not nominate.
No,
Appoint.
no, appoint him.
To fill the term limits of the person he's replacing. Right?
Say again?
To fill the term limits of the person
Of
he's
the person
replacing.
who
Yes.
I guess that's how that would be, rather than
Yes.
sort of setting up a separate term. So he would fill the position, I think Hal Wilkes' position was vacated.
I don't know whose it is, but,
But it would just automatically go towards that date, so you don't have to have it.
That's fine.
because the reason we try to keep those dates is because it rotates people on a regular basis. If the dates keep moving, then all of a sudden you could be replacing
Yeah,
the whole board
you're-
at the
you're
same
right.
time.
You're right. So I guess I could ask Josh to check that off.
I've got it right here.
Okay. Is it Hal Wilkes' position was vacated?
Well, I mean, I think
Doesn't matter.
I think you just make the motion that it fills the person he's replacing, then Terry takes care of it.
Fair enough.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
That's it, Todd.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to unfinished business, discussion possible action on the proposed infrastructure investment plan.
If I may say just a few words. To summarize where we are right now, you know, this started back in mid-December when we made a presentation, me being myself, members of the finance staff, members of the Department of Public Works, made a presentation to you about the current status of the roads. Thereafter, it was asked of us to develop a plan that we presented to you as to what would it look like to speed up investment in our infrastructure, primarily our roads, but all the components that go into making a holistic roadway. Like I said before during my manager's report, there's been a lot of very positive feedback. We've had the opportunity now to give 5 distinct, dedicated presentations about this matter. And we have a lot of information that's been posted online about the projects, a lot more detail than we've even been able to share in these 1 to 2 hour long sessions is available in case anyone's watching online, or for those of you who are in the audience tonight. I really encourage you to go online, learn more about each individual project. We have summary sheets. Those are 2-page documents about each individual road project that we've proposed that goes into detail about what kind of utilities are going to be replaced, what the sidewalk condition is and how that's going to be improved, the drainage improvements that are going to be made, and much more. And those were all put together, primarily put together by Bart Clark in our Department of Public Works, and he did a tremendous job with it. Beyond that, we have a frequently asked questions page on the website and more. We're planning to send a mailer out in early March that details much of this information and encourages people to continue to refer back to the website for more comments. But at this point in time, I dare say the public has had quite an opportunity to weigh in, to present their thoughts, their opinions, and predominantly the sentiment that I have been receiving in my office has been positive. Although I suppose it's only my circle, certainly what I've been seeing on social media and what I've had the opportunity to hear from passersby has also been very positive. This is on the agenda tonight because we need to continue to move this forward. So thank you very much, Bruce. Certainly I give all of you the opportunity, I want to give all of you the opportunity to weigh in and share your thoughts and feelings on the presentation and on the plan as it's been presented so far, and also to see what you would like further steps to be. Present us with some direction.
I really appreciated the last slide that you added to, which showed the sidewalks that we were talking about versus the ordinance that we have in town. So it really gives the residents a clear view of what the ARPA funding for sidewalks could be, in addition to the funding in this proposed infrastructure improvement. I don't know if you had a chance, I mentioned before about the sewers, the water and sewer on Highland Lake. Do you know when you'll be able to add that information onto the website?
I don't have an exact date, I just know we're working on it.
Great, that's excellent. I think that's important because you have every one of the roads that were highlighted in it and the sidewalks, and that's the only component that really needs to be in the packet, so that residents have all of the information that's needed.
You want to go, Steve?
No, go ahead, Katie.
I'm just going to do operationally. Josh, when's the date that the final date we have to decide so that it can get to the bonding and do everything in the time limit? It's April?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, I believe it's April 26th.
I think it's a little bit early.
I thought it was the 14th, maybe.
Oh, is it the 18th? My apologies, we
Something.
have it in an
Okay, so
email
if
somewhere.
it's, just generally speaking, we have 6 weeks to that date, and we haven't done any of the financial calculations, or maybe you guys have, but we need to know the financial calculations on all of this, because we've been talking about the roads and what needs to be done to them and how they need to be fixed. But now, the next piece, I think, is gonna be the most difficult piece for everyone, because this all comes now with the price tag. And the price tag, we know with what you have there is about 18 million, but how does that translate? Now, some of the things that are gonna translate is gonna be dependent on grand list growth, right? And our operating and our expenditures and our capital outlays and what we do. So we have a lot of pressures on us right now in terms of budgets and whatnot. So we need to get this next plan. We also need to get the information out. We can't, Josh can't, political parties can, but town management and staff cannot lobby or send promotional or informational materials out after which date? That same April date, right? So we have 6 weeks or less to send stuff out to people regarding the project, including the financials and everything that's online right now. So our time window is pretty short in terms of operationalizing everything that we have to do. So it would be good to, at the latest, the next meeting is to start to talk about that. And also include like scenarios, grand list growth where it was this year, how that could be translated maybe into future payments, or how grand list growth at certain rates are gonna be able to help us with the payment of that type of bond. We heard tonight through through King & King, the audit firm, in terms of, where we are and how that's gonna translate into the future as well, in terms of we don't have any bond debt, except we're gonna take the bond that's expiring and transfer it over to Hinsdale. So that could kind of be almost even, right? If I remember correctly, it'll be almost even. So the road bonding, we may not have to have we'll have grand list growth, and we may not need to have so much of a mill increase in any one year for it, if we're fortunate and if we plan correctly, but we need to start looking at that. And then the other thing, obviously, is, did anybody want to switch out any roads or anything like that, or add a road, or take away a road, or, but Steve, or Todd?
No, I don't want to add or take away roads, but I was interested in the conversation at the senior center after the presentation. And by the way, Josh, I'll just second what others have said. For you and the team, you've done a great job of putting together the road show. There was discussion about sidewalks and the issue of not only the ordinance, but our policy. And if sidewalks are going to need to be replaced, if we want to do roads and drainage and sidewalks all at the same time, that could be a plus. But some of the comments were around, you know, does the resident bear the full cost of replacing the sidewalk? And I know we've had some discussion from time to time about some cost sharing, and I don't know if the board would like to have our administration take a look at the issue, or we'd like to look at policy in that area. But I know there've been some, at least one case that I know of in the past, where the town collaborated with a resident to share some costs and got a great new sidewalk, a section of sidewalk done. So if we as a board want to take a look at that, I know it'll probably be expensive, but maybe we should look at it anyway to see what the expense might be on some sort of a cost-sharing plan. Is there any interest in that?
I want the bond to get developed first. I think the town manager and his team needs a break. You know, I don't know about, you know, maybe when we're working on the ordinances, maybe in a couple of months or something after we have our budget together, you know, that we can sit down separately and look at that, and then at parking as well. I mean, yeah,
I mean,
parking,
in a perfect world, we would.
but right now it's.
But I think, there's a sidewalk report that a former planner had done that's not that old. And in there was over $12 million worth of sidewalk work. Well, this was just in the downtown core. And so when we start talking about like partnering and whatnot, I guess it's all about the money. I mean, if we could win lottery, we might be able to, you know, find more, but how are we gonna like balance all this, the money? And maybe the new ARPA funds or new grant funds or something like that, maybe we could use.
Yeah, there are stretches in the downtown core that you talk of. The sidewalks are in very good shape, and then there are other sections, and we probably all walked it, where, like, you know, watch your step there, buddy.
I think the ones that, Bruce, you put together were like emergency routes or major connector routes with schools and
It was, yeah,
town hall, and like it was kind of like the work within the bonding was very specific to that, right?
it was very specific around making sure that residents were, children specifically, were able to go to the school safely.
Right.
And that really was the highlight of the area.
Yeah, my thought was if we were going to do something with policy, it would be good for the team to know that ahead of time before the final numbers are put to bed, but maybe that's too short a stretch.
Where would you, I guess the funding would have to come from somewhere, you know, because you didn't want to know how many matching people would want to do, and if people wanted to do it and you ran out of money, how would you then prioritize? And so I think you're right about having the discussion about policy and stuff, you know, an in-depth conversation about that, but I also think Candace is right.
We need to give the town management a break and get our budgets done. That's what I'd like to, I feel better, you know.
Well, we have the bond and the budget's coming.
Yeah, I recognize that we're talking about issues of policy for the sidewalks and bonding issues, but I'm thinking back, we have never voted as a Board of Selectmen on approving this plan to move ahead. I don't think there's been an official vote to say, we like the plan that's been presented by administration, by staff, and we endorse the plan as a total board, and then move ahead from that. But has there been an official vote by us?
Going to referendum, if we would have to do that to vote for it to go to
Well,
referendum.
but if we do it now, and we say we all agree to this, then we're giving, you know, the board's authorization to get the rest of this stuff done on time. But I don't think we've ever had a vote.
No, we haven't. But
So maybe we
does anybody
should.
want to stop the process?
Well, maybe we should have a vote that says we approve the plan as it's been presented, but now we're working out the details of the funding and the,
I'd like to see the funding.
Yeah, I think we need the details of the funding before we can officially, as a board, move it to the town meeting.
But I think there's, before town meeting, we have a few other steps we have to do here. Like, we have to vote to send it to town meeting,
You're right.
right? So,
But I mean.
so
you
I
should
know
see-
what you're saying, Jack. But if we did that, would we then have to vote again to change out a particular issue within either the sidewalk or the road or the drainage or something like that, after we find out about the
yeah, what,
money or?
my only issue is that if we've seen this plan and the public has seen this plan and it looks good and we're not changing any roads or we're not doing anything different, then we give staff the authorization to go ahead and find the funding issues, and that's the next step in. We'll hear those numbers. But as I think Bruce has said in a couple of meetings, that it depends upon, are we going to bond the entire 18.3, or do we do it in separate sections, and the cost of that? So those kinds of figures are still going to be hard to get. But I think the public should know that we're 100% in favor of the plan. And I just don't think we've made that statement yet.
So basically, we just make a motion that says,
We're 100% behind
the Board of
plan.
Selectmen would like to continue the process of a infrastructure bonding plan that includes road, sidewalks, and drainage.
Yeah, I
and
think just to go on
continue
record to
and
say,
direct staff to bring us further updates and financial information.
just to go on record to say, this is where we are. At this point, we've heard it, the public has heard it, we've been hearing it for the last 2 months, and before that. We're not gonna change roads.
I haven't seen the piece on drainage.
Say again?
I haven't seen the piece on drainage to support the presentation. I'm not saying I'm against the $1 million in it, but I'd like to have all the components available to the public and myself.
Well, aren't those components something that we would certainly put together as we're sending it to a referendum? But I'm just saying, at this point, to make a public statement that the plan as we see it, never mind the funding, the plan as we see it is an acceptable plan.
Maybe Todd, maybe you just want to get a consensus from us, and then that could be a,
Okay, so can we have a motion to continue the ongoing process of the infrastructure investment plan to be included prior to the, prior to the funding?
I think you would also want to include the detail of the drainage at the next meeting, financial, financial, that's the word, scenarios.
Thank you.
Bingo. Financial scenarios, the beginning of that at the next meeting, that, maybe like that.
So a motion to move the infrastructure plan forward as is, pending the scenarios and cost scenarios.
financial scenarios.
Change cost to financial.
And drainage detail.
Further details.
Right.
When is this coming to us, Josh?
March,
We can work to have that for you at the March 7th meeting.
Okay.
I can't
think
guarantee that members of the Department of Finance will be there, but certainly I will to present it.
at which meeting, Josh?
The next
one?
meeting,
The next one.
if that's what the board wishes, yes.
On that basis, Jack, it might be premature to vote tonight on a motion. I think we can do the endorsing next week after we hear this detail. That would be my thought.
Yeah, that's fair enough too. I just think that the staff should know, and from us publicly, the public should know, that we all approve it, we all like it. We're not changing it, we're not opposed to it, we're just working out the details. Does that sound fair?
Well, I think we all want it to go forward.
Yes.
I don't think there's any one of us that says, let's stop here. I mean, without even taking a vote, we know that.
Fair enough.
All right, so. Just remember though, March 7th, then it'll be within less than 5 weeks.
That would be the call on the 7th of a full
Right, and then it's
vote.
5 weeks to have everything rounded out, 5 weeks for us to agree with the financing, 5 weeks for the promotional materials to go out.
Yep,
All that, because you're gonna have to have the financial piece to figure out what we send out to the public, because it's nice to send out the list of roads, and everything's on the website now, right? So people could go see it where it is, but there are people that are not on websites and not on social media. People that would like the Winchester Wire that you do, right? So people get it in their hands and they know what it is. So.
I can't promise it'll be a final draft, but I can work to have a comprehensive draft at the next meeting for you to review right before it goes out.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Moving on to item B under unfinished business. Consider and possibly act on the proposed ordinance regarding local veterans' property tax exemptions. And this is the second time on the agenda.
Yes, and so for anybody who's watching at home, and just to refresh the Board of Selectmen's memory, I did bring this forward at the last meeting. It's been brought to our attention and our assessor's attention that there has never been a formal policy on the books about giving an additional local property tax exemption. There is a state exemption that is given on local property taxes. I know that's very confusing, but the state gives a certain level of exemption. Most towns in Connecticut do offer some level of additional exemption. We have been offering a level of additional exemption, but it has never been a uniform written codified policy. So that is what the ordinance is in front of you. Working with Attorney Nelligan, it's been determined that this is the best way to go about adopting such a policy, is to codify it, and this is what most towns do, is codify it within the ordinances. I've proposed, I'm showing you here, language for a proposed ordinance that you can consider, and certainly I'm sure members of the public may have opinions about and may want to share opinions about with the board. This is the second time that this is in front of you, which means at the next meeting, that will be the third time that this proposed ordinance will appear before you, and at that point in time, you will have the prerogative to adopt if you so choose, or make amendments before adopting if that's preferred.
Just don't mean to be a little policy wonk, but we never made a motion did we? Did we make a motion last time to send it to ordinance for the first time?
I believe we did.
With minutes in. Does anybody remember?
Motion in compliance with Charter Protocol for adoption of new ordinance to the Board of Selectmen to place the property tax exemption for veterans on the agenda, following the procedure of steps for amending, adopting, or replacing bylaws and ordinances. Motion, Selectman Bouchard, second, Borg, vote unanimous. So I feel that that's the first step.
Okay.
So we are now in phase 2.
Right, so do you have I'm looking at, for mine.
You want to know that's on page?
The steps of ordinances, not the minutes.
Got it. When do we have to advertise it?
Well, that's the thing, that's what I'm trying to look up.
Yeah, because we changed the advertising.
I just have it too, I just sent it out, it was open on my home computer. Well, anyway, I guess we motioned to it, that the Board of Selectmen intends on creating an ordinance for the veterans exemption. That should be on the town's website, was it? The policy?
The policy was placed on the town's website through the last,
The one that we have in front of us?
yes. This was placed on the town's website as a part of the last meeting agenda. So it's now been listed there for some
We need to put it in a legal section.
2.5 weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
Just because we changed our ordinance in terms of publishing, since we don't have to publish the full ordinance in the paper anymore, but we have to publish it on our website
Correct.
under legal.
When's the last time we did an ordinance?
Oh, that was this was the ordinance we last did.
No, I mean before that.
So I have the policy here.
I'm
And the-
looking yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, sorry, it's very small.
That's all right, I
It's,
get a little eyes.
I'll turn it this way so you can read full
I guess
sentences.
he's saying I'm old, I can't see anything. That's-
Just trying to be a little useful.
Yeah, thanks. So we discussed it at a public meeting and agrees that it needs to be created, which we did. Must be noticed for 2 weeks prior to the Board of Selectmen meeting as a notice of intent, published on the Town of Winchester's website under legal notices 2 weeks in a row before action on the ordinance takes place with the date of the meeting at which we intend to adopt. And then step 3 is the meeting takes place, we agree again that we need to adopt it, and then we go to the next one, then it moves to step 4, where the ordinance book is updated, so.
Josh, I just have a clarification question again, and you may have said this before, and I just don't remember. The exemption of 5,000 of assessed value, that's in keeping with what we've been doing? That's
So
not a change up or lower, that's in style of what we've had in the past.
there were a variety of different exemptions that were given depending on when the exemption was issued. So this is on the high side, but it is not actually the highest level of exemption that somebody was given. The
So how
highest
did you
level of
arrive at the
exemption-
5,000?
5,000 is the average of the different exemptions that are offered by surrounding towns. So, for example, Torrington offers a higher amount, but Barkhamsted offers a lower amount than 5,000. So 5,000 was a reasonable place from my perspective to start. It is certainly, as I described last time, you may recall, it's the selectmen's prerogative to increase that. But I wanted to give you a reasonable base within our geographic region to start and be able to provide a greater opportunity there. I did tell you at the last meeting that I was going to bring forward a number associated with the highest, and I know that 5,000 isn't that number, a number associated with the highest level of exemption given to any veteran, and I haven't determined what that is yet. I will have it for you at the next meeting.
And
So
that's
that
the-
will make
that's-
sure.
That's over a period of time in our own town that you're gonna get those figures.
Well, that will be the current numbers, or the numbers that up to the present time have been used within the assessor's office.
So as we're proposing this ordinance now, we could change that 5,000.
Yes.
Then you have to redo the ordinance.
Excuse me?
Then you'd have to redo the ordinance.
You have to start the process again.
Right.
Right.
And just a FYI, I mean, it's always a difficult conversation to have these things, but I think Josh probably did the work around these numbers because within our budget, the money that gets decreased has to be made up somewhere else.
Yes.
So the more we increase, the more we have to make up. So.
Well, I'm aware of that. I was just wondering where that number came from, and because during our discussion, we said there was highs and lows, and
Right, so I think he found a spot that's probably in the middle.
That's fair.
And it's too bad that this was never, there wasn't a good policy on it. Because that's the unfortunate piece about it. But we know that under this, most the veterans that have applied will be, taken care of in this too, so.
Yeah. And it's of the assessed value of the house.
It
Of the
is. It
property.
is of the assessed value.
So I'm not even sure how much does that make in tax difference?
Depends upon your house.
Well, and it also depends upon the number, well, for an individual, we can certainly calculate that easily. It depends on how many people qualify, which if you read through the ordinance itself as it's been proposed, in the eligibility and the maximum income requirements sections, there are specific income limits and somebody has to fall underneath that maximum income requirement in order to receive such an exemption as this ordinance reads. That's the way that most towns do it across the state. There are some towns that have decided to increase that level beyond what the state has set. The state has specific maximum income requirements and towns can go above that. If you allow any veteran to receive the maximum benefit from this, that's a very different impact than if you stick with the state's maximum income requirement and you have it be just a $5,000 exemption. So I can have, as we discussed with scenarios for the infrastructure plan, I will also have some scenarios to present to you at the next meeting regarding different income requirements and what how that might affect the amount of money exempted. And how the different level of exemption, whether it be 5,000, I believe the statutory limits it could be anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000, and how that might impact the budget. I can tell you from the initial numbers that I took a look at, it could be significant.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions I can answer for the board on this matter? Okay, then it sounds like I have my homework to do, and I'll certainly have more information for you at the next meeting.
Moving on to new business, proposed line item transfers.
I don't know, Anne Marie, if you would like to speak to this at all, or if you'd like me to present the information.
Like I would just say on your action request line, on your action request that you see that I'll take and just put my name instead of Bruce's.
Yes, my apologies. My name's at the top of these, but Terry puts them together, and she must have just missed that.
Thank you, Josh.
Very much.
In two places.
So you have a proposed, I assume it just wasn't that.
Bruce and Josh.
Proposed line item transfer. This is an intradepartmental, that isn't correct either. This is an intradepartmental transfer of appropriations. After the vast majority of the winter is concluded, Jim has determined that he has a leftover, an overage in his sand for ice control line item in the amount of $10,000 and increased need for maintenance of equipment. And we've been talking about that a lot ad nauseum really over the past several years about the fact that equipment and vehicles require more and more maintenance if we're going to keep them longer and try and lower ongoing replacement costs. And this is an easy way for us to make some improvements in that equipment with the overage that we have in sand for ice control in the amount of $10,000.
Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the line item transfer of $10,000 from sand for ice control, 311-860-00000, to maintenance of equipment, 311-826-0000, in the amount of $10,000.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Question, is this also due to the fact that we now have a protection of our sand? Now that we have a new unit that, protecting it so that we don't have to purchase it more because it's in good condition?
My understanding is that this, yes, this, the,
I
what's the
know-
word I'm looking for?
I know what it's called. Salt shed.
Yes, the salt shed
Thank you.
has been a real help
That's
down
what I
at the
thought,
Public
yeah.
Works office. And I should have noted, you know, Jim Rollins, as he wrote up this request, did note, COVID inflation costs have driven up equipment repair costs up to 200% in some cases he's found. This is significant. $10,000 comes nowhere close to covering 200% inflation rates. And I hope you all understand some of the need to move money around, given how unreliable our projections have been with COVID inflation.
Any further discussion on it? All in favor? Unanimous? Citizens' comments. The Board of Selectmen welcomes public comments. Speakers may speak only once this round and will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Would anyone like to speak? Selectmen's comments and reports? Anyone have anything? Katie?
Yeah, I'd like the board to consider establishing a charter commission for the purposes of looking at the boards and commissions. It seems like every year it comes up, who can be on a board or who can be on a commission. You know, one board will say, yeah, it could be somebody that's a property owner. Another one will say it could be somebody, there has to be somebody that's a resident. And so that's always been a technical issue. The other technical issue is who's an elector at times. I know that Kevin has talked about that for a long period of time. And I bring it up now because of timelines, because ideally you'd like to have any charter commission change in November, because that's when you just have to have everybody vote on it. Otherwise, you have to do a 5% or 7% of the registered voters would have to vote in that referendum for it. So November's the best time. It's an off election year, which is even better, because then it becomes just a, bipartisan, nice kind of focus on technical issues. And right now, again, because it's March, by the time you see the commission, by the time you have the commission do some of its work, and then give reports back to us and whatnot, and have to be ready to go in September, this would be the window to do it. And if we want to do it, we should do it and I'm only looking at technical changes in the areas that I just mentioned. Because I can't think of a board and commission meeting discussion, board and commission members' discussion in the past 6 months that hasn't included one of those conversations. So we've changed the technical things for bidding processes. We've changed the technical things for, putting the legal notices like we just discussed on the website to save the town taxpayers a lot of money. So I think this one would also serve us well, because maybe we want to include more people to be able to be on a board or commission, people that own 2 homes. Maybe we want them to be included a little bit more or not, so.
I'll second.
So,
Do we want to put it on the agenda next meeting with bringing names for the charter commission?
yeah, we just have to go find people.
You would be proposing a 7-member commit?
I don't know that it needs to be 7. I'm just talking about technical changes. I don't want, charter commissions, obviously, we all know,
I don't think we had 7
we're
before.
experienced here. We've had 7
I
before.
thought we each appointed 1 member.
We've done
That's why
that.
there was 7.
We've done that. We've had 5 people, there's no set number for it. Charter commissions usually follow along with their charges. Some in the way past have known could go rogue, but it's not really a good idea, because that's come back to us anyway to move on. But, I know when Candace did one, there was a nice format that gets used. This is what it was, this is what it's new.
We already have it drafted by
Right.
the Kevin Nelligan. This change she suggested was already drafted before.
Right, so we could do a 5-member. We don't all have to find somebody, unless everybody wants to find somebody.
I'm fine with 5 members. Anyone else have any opinions?
I'm fine with 5.
Okay,
You
so,
know, the hardest part is finding people that would have the time to do
Finding
that.
5.
That, and understands kind of what it all involves and understands where the charter is and stuff, so. All right, so then we reform it the next time. So maybe what we should all do is if we think of somebody, run it by Todd, so that he has the names and stuff, and, that way we can get to 5.
Oh, and we can put that on our website saying that we're looking for volunteers too.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
A great idea.
Right, but there has to be people that understand the charter and understand the work too, so.
I don't know if anybody ever understands the charter totally.
Huh?
Could be board members of boards and commissions
Right.
who understand,
Right.
you know, the impact.
Would it be useful to have a formal written charge
I-
developed?
Well, maybe, but I also think, like, I've already thought of a couple people, because obviously I knew I was gonna say this, so I've already thought of a couple people and whatnot that, you know, would be in that kind of realm of things, so.
Well, I mean more for the, I apologize, not in terms of
No,
who
I
should be a
think-
part of it, but rather
I think you're right, absolutely.
a written mission statement for what they should be looking for, what they should be considering. I know you just articulated it
Right.
very well auditorily, but
Right, but, again, you know, I'm starting this, like, little project thing, and, you know, we don't want you to have to
oh, I'm not
go-
saying I should write it. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if somebody should write
Okay,
it.
don't you be volunteering, because you will get us the finance numbers on that.
Because it's only the starting place,
Infrastructure.
because the
Right.
charter group may not even want to address it. It's only our suggestion to them.
Right.
They
Yeah.
have
So-
the ability to change it entirely.
Right, so what I would expect too is that, while we're finding people, that this board gives them a charge. So I came up with, you know, 2 things. I don't know if anybody else wants anything else or anything else. And, I mean, there's a lot of things technically in that charter with
I mean, you could,
typos, language.
fire chief.
You know, there's a lot of things in there. I mean, I remember back, oh God, when was it? There was one that we tried to do all the technical changes on it, but it was like maybe, I think, there were so many technical changes that people's were like, eyes rolled in the back of their heads, and
I think that for that, there just wasn't a clarity as to
Right.
the voter and elector and what that meant.
Right.
And so,
So we've learned in the past few that if we keep things.
Keep it simple.
The simple charges that make sense, then we could slowly over time do it. But I just didn't want to miss the window. Because otherwise you have, it just, anyway.
It's good. Who else has comments? Linda?
Josh, I was wondering, did you want to say anything about the Housing Plan Steering Committee Forum next week?
We absolutely should. Let me pull up the information for that on my calendar. But what Linda is referring to is the Housing Steering Committee that we've put together, and this is the group that is working off the grant money that we received from the state of Connecticut to put together a housing plan for the town of Winchester, has decided that, and it's part of the requirements around putting together this housing plan, has decided to hold a public, not just informational session, but really feedback gathering session where we'll have an opportunity to share information about the housing plan process with the public, hear back from members of the public about their thoughts with town housing and so forth, and really have an opportunity to engage with the public on a number of those items. And that is occurring early on, and of course I'm going to have trouble pulling up the specific date and time.
It's March 3rd.
Yes, it's the evening of March 3rd. Information is on our website. Information will continue to be posted on the website and on social media. It will be virtual, so you'll have an opportunity to get in by Zoom, access the meeting. That Zoom information will be made available on our website, so it'll be free to access. And if anybody has any questions in advance, you can direct them to me. My contact information's on the website. If you need access to the internet in order to participate, please reach out in advance and we can help get you set up, or you can visit the public library, so long as they have open hours that day, and I'll investigate that a little bit.
Yeah, there is an invitation or an announcement, but it's difficult to find. Could you?
Yeah, we'll
make
bring it to
more
the front.
visible?
Yep, you've got it. Thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention, Linda.
Jack, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a question on status. I know the word ordinance has come up many times tonight. Where are we on that ordinance review committee? Or not the committee, but the rewrite and
It
the,
was forwarded to, I got the email. It was forwarded to Josh and Terry for the last step of the review of what we gave them before. And then it's going back to general code, and then they will be sending us.
so where is that? It's right in your hands now?
It's in my hands now. We have a few questions that we need to answer, a few, clarifying questions that we need to answer for them so that they can get everything set in their system. And then they're going to issue us a big stack of ordinances as we've described them wanting to appear and as we've described them wanting to be presented. And then that will be shared with all of you. You'll have the opportunity to review that, ask questions, deliberate, and finally, there will be, just as we go through with any other ordinance process, Attorney Nelligan said that we'll notice it online, the public will have the opportunity to make comments, and you will have one vote to adopt the whole code as a unit. Or you can always, move to separate the question if you so choose.
I
but-
just was wondering what the status was.
Just have a couple of things. Today is February 22nd. Residents have until our next meeting, which is March 7th, to provide any input on the retail cannabis. Can be emailed, your correspondence can be emailed town manager at townofwinchester.org. Can be emailed to mayor@townofwinchester.org. To be shared with the rest of the board, and we'll be taking that for 2 more weeks. Last thing I have, anyone who was on social media last week may have noticed that we have a new resident in town. We've unofficially adopted him as our mascot, and we're gonna be launching a contest to name him. It'll be for a charity in town. I don't believe we've decided which one yet. But that'll be released soon. So start thinking of your names for Mr. Moose or Mrs. Moose.
Is he still here?
No,
Sure he is. He's our new resident.
Colebrook's resident.
Mark Hampstead adopted him also.
Maybe we should adopt that bear, that mama bear.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
poor mother.
Everybody wants
That
to
poor
move to
mother.
Winchester. Steve,
I move we adjourn.
is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. And I see 10 inches of snow for Friday maybe for us.
No.
We still are.
Are you really?
3 to 6, possibly 3 to 6 plus for us.
God, do you know what the name of the fire station is that's across from Whiting Street? That's on Holabird, across from Whiting Mills?
Is that engine 5?
I don't know. I'll drive by. It will say something on the outside, right?
Possibly. Here.
There's only 4 firehouses, so I don't know what. Or 3? 3 or 4. I was just curious if anyone knew. I couldn't figure out which one it was.